So now I'd like to introduce Dan Horwich, who's the president of Camp IT Conferences, who we're putting this webinar on in partnership with today.
Thank you, Cynthia, and thank you for everyone joining us. We've been at Camp IT, we've been hosting enterprise IT conferences for 36 years, and due to the current environment, we brought all of our offerings online, which presents a great opportunity for IT professionals to join us from around the world. Today, our audience consists of attendees from the United States, from the UK, from Germany, from China, from Australia, from India. So we welcome you to join us at future events as well. And if you're interested in sharing your experiences at an upcoming Camp IT conference, we'd certainly love to hear from you. Cynthia, thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Dan. So here's the agenda for today. We'll begin with some introductions of our moderator and our panelists, and then we'll dive into the discussion topics, and then we'll end with some Q&A. So now I'd like to turn it over to Brian Rogan, who's our Senior Vice President here at Emergent, and he will be our moderator for today. Brian?
Thank you, Cynthia. Welcome, everyone. I'm Brian Rogan. I'm a Senior Executive with Emergent. For those of you that aren't as familiar with Emergent, haven't been a customer or aren't a current customer, let me give you just a brief overview on Emergent. So I'm located today in sunny Northern California. I'm out of Mountain View, California. That's, in other words, some name it Google land. That's where I'm located today. But our headquarters in the North American area is out of Boston, Mass. Our headquarters, global headquarters, is out of London, UK. And just to get familiar with the company, and I'll talk more toward the end of the presentation, but we're a global company. We specialize in consulting, engineering services, in addition to learning services. I'll go through that in more detail toward the end. But other than that, many of you that have joined today from the consulting perspective have worked with us on building better products and services. Many of you have worked in the engineering space where we help on digital transformation, modernization, re-engineering. That can be in many different categories. And then in the technology space, which is engineering, we work extremely closely with some of the large enterprise companies like SAP, Oracle, Microsoft, Salesforce, and many others. And then the learning component, we actually started writing IP and principles around modern ways of working and how you can build better products, how you can build better customer journeys and pathways of agile learning. So I won't go through any more detail, but again, we welcome you. So moving forward, I would like to introduce a fantastic group of panelists. What I'm going to do, instead of going through introductions myself, I'm going to introduce each panelist individually, and I'll start from the top with Nag. We'll introduce him. Nag will give a little profile of himself, the company he works with today, and others he's worked with in the past. That'll be his choice. And then tell us a little bit about what you've been doing in automation. How did you get started, and what are some of the key successes that could be helpful to the audience that's attending today? Thank you, Nag.
Thank you, Brian. Hello everyone. It's different time zones based on where you're coming from, and today I serve as the CTO for OneMain Financial. OneMain Financial is a primary lender in the, I would say, in the segment that banks don't want to serve, but they are worth more than payday lenders. So it's in that 650-ish FICO score range where we take care of our customers. We have about 1,600 branches in 44 states in the US and about 10,000 employees. So it's a pretty large-sized personal lending company. I joined OneMain about 2 years ago, and I came from the Nordics. So I worked in Denmark and Norway before coming to OneMain. Prior to that, I was with Allstate in the Chicago area. And before that, I was with British Aerospace in Farnborough, England. So I've kind of worked in different domains, and it has led me to really understand why business processes are important, what is the role of automation. And high level, I've looked at four types of automation, right? Just to kind of set the stage. And then I'll give you a couple of examples for what we're doing and successes. So the four types of automation that I've seen in my journey, having worked in 11 different countries, is data validation and data entry. I'll call them two different levels. One is just exception processing, taking care of exceptions, then entering data in different systems. Because when we build new applications, what happens is we don't always integrate them. And rather than having human integration machines, as I call it, we use automation to kind of pre-fill data in those other dependent systems. The third thing I've seen is data or system integration, where we build new platforms, but don't have the time or the knowledge to populate dependent systems that do the backend processing. So I've used automation from that perspective. And the last part I would say is trigger-based automation or conversational automation, more with the conversational AI that is emerging, right, with machine learning, OCR, things like that. So those are some of those are the four categories I would say I've worked with in the different experiences I've had. I'll give you a couple of examples and kind of talk through one or two recent ones just to kind of say how we've been successful. So one of the things we did was when I was in the Nordics, we worked on building out a real estate kind of mobile app. And it was really good to find the real estate you desire, select, it would match up to say whether you can pay it financially, are you worth it? But then we had to make sure that the back end, which was an old legacy system, got all of that information to process the loan. So what we did there was we used automation, we built bots, and we used those bots to kind of pre-populate what we would have done as typical system integration, so that information went to the back end. The key thing there was governance and security, of course, right? We had to write it right, so it processed the right information. And then we had to make sure it was secure because we were putting bots in place. So that is one example I thought which really worked well for us because we could get the speed of getting the mobile app out. At the same time, we made sure that we kept the system of record intact. Another example that we did was with mortgage processing, where these were exceptions. And as you people who have been in the mortgage industry will know, we get a lot of applications, but many times they have data errors. And typically that goes to call centers who have to take each one of these files and figure out what these errors are. And they are many times common errors. So what we did there was we used automation to kind of triage the types of errors, and then we employed automation to kind of clean up those errors. So that gave us a lot of good productivity related, I would say, benefits. Where I'm working now, we have done a couple of things which have been super helpful, I would say, in the compliance space. So with today's business climate, with all of us working remotely, the team is not all sitting together to look at files and handshake these files. So we have used automation really to kind of triage the types of compliance things we have to look through in files. And then we have kind of balanced out, making sure that we are complying with what is needed as part of the loan process. The second example, which we've done recently, again, because of the pandemic, is live chat. So what we've done is as we have matured our digital channel, we have built live chat capabilities, which talks to the backend and answers, I would say, simple questions or mostly asked questions. We have also kind of then attached that to push notifications as well as two-way texts. So we have done a bunch of automation that otherwise would have had branch team members having to talk to customers to get them through the loan process. Again, that has been a huge advantage for us because our customers cannot easily or more, I would say more easily walk into branches today, at least in the US. And the second part really is for branch team members to feel safe while interacting with people who they don't typically interact with as customers, right? So it gives them that opportunity to have that distance while kind of using automation to answer the basic questions. So Brian, those would be some key examples just as an introduction from me.
Yeah, that's great. So it sounds like you're doing quite a bit of business virtually. and you've automated that, and I would imagine that's helped dramatically in client experience as well. Danny, do the same. Welcome to the webinar. Thank you for joining. Give us a little bit of your background and how you got started and some of the good successes.
Yes, thank you, Brian. Thank you for inviting also. Danny de Greef working for Sanofi Pasteur. It's a global vaccine company, and currently Senior Director Digital Transformation there. I must immediately add, I'm not speaking on behalf of Sanofi today, it's on my own behalf here, but just to get that out of the way for our legal people. As you can also see, there's an aspect of unconventional innovation. It's kind of a thread in my past. If you look me up on LinkedIn, you'll see that. Started in the laboratory and went more and more into the way of innovation, unconventional innovation, 10x innovation, but also very down to earth, making our processes better in different types of roles. To your question, Brian, how did I get started in automation? I think it's really without any limit of time. So I'll go back to the early 90s when I started, and that was a time when you had the matrix printers who made a lot of noise, and you had these big boxes over it to avoid the noise. Sure. And paper getting printed out, and then people doing hand calculation. And so my first thing then was like, okay, if we do this all the time, and so this was a laboratory setting, we're going to do this for years and years. This was like, okay, we're going to automate this, and then today you would say this is data analytics maybe, but then it was like, okay, we're going to use Excel 3, and we made nice boxes, formulas, some automated charts. So everything was like way better, reproducible, faster, everything you want. At that time, comparing to the hand calculation on green paper. So that was like the beginning, and it was all with that thinking, and that's kind of a threat. Is like, well, if you can automate it, if it's something that comes back regularly and it needs to be repeated, why not automate it? Yeah, why not? Why continue to do that by hand or with manual effort?
Hey, Danny, by the way, that's a great point. These repetitive tasks. That's what we've seen with most clients. That's kind of their first start, is try to get rid of that load of repetitive tasks where it could easily be automated and value could be driven in different directions with the human.
Absolutely, and very often with very little investment, so that the output, the return is actually pretty good, and not necessarily needing a big team and 2 years of effort. So from a successes perspective, maybe two. I'm going to contradict myself here, saying like, okay, we, as you can repeat, automate it. Well, sometimes the best option, I think, is to remove automation, is to not automate. And one example there was where I was leading a team, and we had a kind of a sister team that was doing the same type of activities, same challenges and so on. And it turned out that we were like 4 times more productive than the other group. And for several reasons, but one of the reasons was that they had a lot of automation in there that was not really living up to its expectations. It was not really useful. It was great for the company video if you had some blue light and some orange light, and I mean, it looks nice, but it actually didn't help. It was actually negative productivity. And so when that group was joined to my group at the time, we said, okay, we're going to review the processes and we're going to remove some pieces here and continue to automate further, don't get me wrong, but remove some pieces which are not really helping here, and they cost a lot and they don't really help. And another example in kind of the same choices that we need to make, I think, was a situation where we had a very high volume test to be done for many years, and one group of people wanted to automate this with adding a robot to do that same manual process in a robot-driven way. Our proposal was to say, like, we have simulated, and for our situation here, in this particular situation, we don't think that's the right way to go. You can actually first simplify the existing process we had then, and then automate that part. Yeah, and so that resulted effectively in an improvement that instead of having a need for 13 FTE each year going forward to do that particular volume of work, we brought it down to 2.2 FTE. But it was not automation itself. It was first reviewing the process, seeing how you can simplify things, and then automate, and that gave us the biggest impact.
Yeah, no, I love that comment because it has to do with the portfolio, first of all, right? And then the processes. Is that going to create productivity or headaches?
Yeah, exactly.
So, and so sometimes that's just a matter of knowing the portfolio. And we all know we have plenty of backlog projects. So we want to keep that to a minimum.
Yeah, and sometimes when it's not because it's automated that it's better.
Correct.
Sometimes it's not. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm glad you brought that up. So, and we'll get back to you on some of the innovative points of automation and the future of automation. But let's go to the next panelist. Eric, why don't you do the same thing? You and I have had some good conversations. Tell us a little bit about your background related to automation and what you're doing today and some of those key successes around the supply chain and other areas that you've discussed.
Thanks, Brian, and it's a pleasure to be here with everyone. And good afternoon, good evening to everyone. My name is Eric Kello. I'm the Global Head of Information Digital Technology for Operations for British American Tobacco. We're the largest tobacco company in the world. And we're also building out into new categories, whether it be vaping, heated tobacco, and modern oral sort of technology. Automation has been something, through my career, I've been in technology for over 20 years, from everything from the airline to consumer goods industry and healthcare business. And, automation technology has always been at the heart of what we do. And in British American Tobacco, it's no different. And from our experience, and what I've seen over the last, 13 years in BAT, we started actually quite a while ago, and it started actually with a key step in our business, which was really trying to drive a standardized operating model as a group. We were very much a federated company. And the reason why that was important, through that operating model and defining that, we were able to standardize our processes and then to effectively enable those through a single instance of SAP. And that's become kind of the backbone of our starting point for our sort of real acceleration of automation, which again, like some of the other panels have highlighted, has been really in that starting with that automation of task or process and really focusing on value cases and sort of in that template, in those standard processes of where we can remove those repetitive tasks and automate those to generate efficiencies. And what we're seeing is we can really augment our teams so they can focus on higher value sort of activities and more through the insights and decisions to look at optimization further in terms of opportunities across our business. It's at the same time of us doing that, we've been also looking at expanding it out into what I would say more automation of production. And that's through, and at the same time, in parallel, we're really trying to amass large amounts of data and building an enterprise data lake. And through that data lake and amassing sort of quite sizable amount of data, we're building into now driving more AI use cases because we have the critical mass in terms of data sets. And through that, we've been able to sort of, enter into really more broader AI use cases and really looking at whether it be automation of production, but also heading into, sort of automation of some decisions. And in some of the areas where we're applying this, we've seen big value is again, in terms of, in our supply chain. And it's been really relevant this year, and I know everyone's been hit hard with the pandemic. And for us, it's no different. We operate in 180 markets, and each market is reacting and responding in very, very different ways. One market, for instance, South Africa, moved our product, into a non-essential item, and we had to close our manufacturing overnight. That manufacturing also supported other markets in Africa. So we had to respond in terms of and dynamically adapt our supply chain to these changing borders and policies. And automation allowed us to do that. One example is we have a tool that we apply AI and automation to drive greater forecast accuracy of our marine shipments. So we've seen through AI 30% more accurate prediction in terms of when our marine shipments will be coming in. So we can then predict in terms of whether that would have an impact in terms of our production or potentially in terms of fulfilling demand in terms of our customers around the world. So we're seeing great benefits. We're also applying this in terms of how we work in our sales and distribution. So we have a lot of markets where we have trade reps, we're going out to retailers, and we're able to use, again, automation to, one, not only help them find the best route and to optimize that path through those customers, to optimize the maximum amount of visits they can make with their retailers, but also when they're visiting the retailer, to take some of the complexity of making the decisions to give them suggested orders quantities in terms of based off of algorithms and insights and data. So we know that we're not only supporting our what we want to do in terms of effective for our business, but also in terms of what's right for that retailer in that demographic population, and to really drive the best outcome for both sides. So it's really automation, something very exciting, core for British American Tobacco. And I can see us certainly we're growing exponentially in terms of the use cases and continuing learning from this as we go forward with this journey.
Yeah, so thank you again, Eric. You made some great points. And regardless of the vertical one's in, there's been change everywhere. Correct? I mean, we've heard it from all of the panelists. At retail, completely different. And moving forward, banking, we just heard Nag talk about virtual banking, where it came as a benefit. It's actually increasing their customer experience. And then the supply chain, there's been a reboot on supply chain and numerous accounts of ours. So thank you for those comments. Do the same thing. You and I've talked about this. Introduce yourself. You have some very good success cases of automation. I think the audience and the panelists would love to hear a few of those. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Happy to. So hello, everyone. I know we're in all different time zones. So greetings wherever you are. I live in Denver, Colorado. And I've been with Transamerica 3 years now, almost to the day. So happy to be able to speak with you today. So I'll give a perspective from the marketing chair. And we really use automation in two main areas. One, for deployment of our marketing campaigns, and those are multi-channel. But we use automation to help us segment the audience, target them, and then ultimately deploy the emails. And, we're somewhat nascent, I think, on that journey. We'd like to move from, one-off email campaigns into more of a journey-based approach using Salesforce, CRM, and Marketing Cloud. But you've got to walk before you run. So good progress this past year in that regard. And then the second area where we use automation is around workflow. So our team manages on average 450 projects per month. And, to try to do that in a manual fashion would be near impossible. So we rely on an automation tool to help us move projects through the various steps in a process to get compliance approval, et cetera. And so again, relatively new for us in the last couple of years, I would say. But like many of you, I think, that are on this call, as we go into 21, we're expected to do more with the same amount of resources if we're lucky, and in many cases with fewer resources. So automation, I see as a foundational capability that we need at Transamerica across a number of different areas, but certainly in marketing. And Brian and I can get into more examples later on during the panel discussion.
Yeah, no, that's a great introduction. The future of automation. We've talked about this. Tell me your thoughts, whether it's within your specific division or vertical or company, or other thoughts around governance. Let's just open it up and see if we can get a discussion where everyone gets a better understanding of where it's going. And I'll preface one thing. many of the analysts are calling the future hyper automation, right? And there's a number of areas to define that by. And I've spoken with every one of the panelists, so everyone's quite clear on what's happening in that space. But we could even say automation, AI, machine learning, or machine to machine, and kind of what happens in the future, right? We have Uber today. We have self-driven autonomous vehicles tomorrow. Actually today, I'm sitting in Mountain View. So the Waco mobiles go by and everyone's playing cards and no one's driving. So it's real. They're delivering food because they've locked down. The food is going by in a cooler looking capsule with 8 wheels. And as long as you're within 2 miles of the city, it's dropping any type of food you care to right at your doorstep. So automation is happening real time. And I think it's been driven even more so by the pandemic and some of the shutdowns. But let's go back to the original question, future of automation. I'll go to you, Nag, first. And any thoughts on what you're looking at from a portfolio or future innovation in that realm of automation?
I think key thing for us, right, is we all have realized as part of this pandemic or as an output or a variable from this pandemic that we have to rethink a lot of what we have done and assumed in the past. We have assumed within our company, we are a branch-based model. People are going to walk in, they're going to have a lot of contact with the branch team members. And now it's really making us think about operating models. It's also making us think about how do we leverage alternate channels to kind of connect with our customers. So do they need full assistance from a human being? Can they be partially assisted by a human being, or can they do stuff by themselves? And what that's causing us to do now is to look at our current business processes and the customer journeys that accompany these business processes. Many of these customer journeys actually need a refresh now, because the way we thought about automation and we thought about where humans interject in these business processes are being questioned, right? So that's a space we're looking at. Simple things like third-party integrations that we may not have done previously, and using automation really to kind of get a lot of the information versus asking that particular customer. That is something that we have started doing, and it's really helped us in terms of closing loans a little faster with more accuracy. At the same time, it's also creating a level of engagement with third parties with different products that they might be able to offer. The latest one we've done is with OCR now, right? And as you know, right, Brian, in the US, we have all forms of income statements, some handwritten, some kind of coming in very, very different formats. And through AI now, conversational AI, what we've done is we've been able to deploy OCR with a third-party integration to actually get that automated. That's a huge part of the loan process, right? Are they employed? How much money do they make? And what is their net income, if I call it? So that has been a key thing that we've looked at as an example. And we said, hey, can we replicate that throughout the origination process versus the collection process, the payment process? And then we also offer insurance. So from an insurance standpoint, we offer optional products. Through the pandemic, we made that electronically available. And for people who have worked in insurance, they know it's very hard to sell insurance products totally digitally. So we are looking at how can we use automation there to kind of inform the customers enough as to why that insurance product is critical when they take a loan with us. So that's another example. And I would say the last example is really in the call centers in the collection space, right? Somebody talked about using like the marketing, right? From a CMO standpoint, he talked about Transamerica using it for campaign management and things. We're trying to look at it from a delinquency management standpoint. So how do we kind of manage delinquencies knowing that this state is going to exist for a while? So those are some of the ways we're looking at it. So automation has actually taken a central place, I would say, in terms of how we have thought through capabilities that we want to create, as well as for how we want to employ our people in the company.
Yeah, that's great insight. Thanks, Nag. I have one quick question for you, Nag, and this is for others. Is anyone using NLP the natural language process for your financials, or even that automation around RPA or for credit risk or applications?
We use not really NLPs yet. We're doing a lot of text analytics,
Okay. Yep.
but not directly NLP yet. No, I don't know
Okay.
about the others. Not us yet.
Okay, good. Danny, same question. Innovative thoughts, ideas. Where do you think this thing's going on a fast track?
Yeah, so well, on the technical side, certainly I will agree with everything mentioned, the AI, anything technical certainly will be there. But I think that to me, the answer to this question is the word human, because in the end, why are we automating? Yeah, we shouldn't be automating just to automate. It's like, it's kind of a result, it's kind of an outcome to say we want to improve something, whatever metric you're looking at. And automation is here the answer. It can be NLP, and we have been using that in some instances. It can be, I mean, the whole variety of technical possibilities today. But I think it should be kind of like, you do this because you know you're going to have an upside here, and not just because it's automated. But what I've seen very often, even if it's just making technical or new tools or the newer tools available for the overall population, is that the tools are made available, but not necessarily the training, how you use it, how can you get the best out of those tools. So you may have a situation where you have the fantastic tools, but people are not getting the best out of it because there hasn't been an investment in there. I've seen the same thing happening in AI projects I've been leading, where you say, well, the technical power is all there, the eye is all there, it's all great, but if the mindset of people hasn't adapted to working with these new tools or these new approaches, we miss out on some really big upsides. And there must be many really good AI projects, for example, where you say, well, the insights were there, what everybody's looking for, but the translation was not there, or the connection between the people who doing the analysis, or the people in the business, and maybe the scientists, if it's a scientific environment, they speak in different language. And so despite all the great automation, the results are not there. So that's why I say, well, let's not forget the human in the whole picture here.
Oh, that's a good point. And ways of working, modern ways of working.
Exactly.
Those have been brought up by each one of you. So thank you for that insight. Eric, you have some, I know we've talked about this. I'll open it up for any ideas you have.
Yeah, so the future for us is, going for the next maturity step. And I think it is truly what I would call hyper automation, which is starting to connect the machines. And it's looking at, building off of the human point, is looking at that true end-to-end process automation. And we have a lot of points where, we automate a process, and then there's a human that checks the results and then makes another decision, and might trigger another set of automation or rules in a process. And so, going to that hyper automation is connecting these engines of automation to speak to each other, and looking at how, if we have a shipment that is going to be delayed to a port, and we know that the materials on that are critical for that production line, well, we don't have to have an operator read that and make a decision. We know what decision would need to be made is we need to obviously either air freight or redirect supplies, or potentially production, and the machine should be able to easily make that decision faster. And again, through COVID, we're seeing, the time of which we have and the decisions we need to make, we can only do that really with augmentation of these machines and that hyper automation. So for us, that's a huge next step, and I think we're going to branch into that. And I think I think the other two areas for the future is really going to be, it will be a lot more work on data quality. I think we will recognize more and more that data quality is going to become a bigger issue, and how can we use automation to help in that? And last but not least, I think there's a point of how can we go even a step further. We take your heavily regulated environment, and we pride ourselves in terms of our standards of which we operate in, and in terms of within those regulation boundaries, and the ethics we apply in terms of how we market and sell our products, knowing that they have a harmful effect on people. And so what we want to look at is how can we apply those same ethics and governance also in terms of the automation that we're building, whether it be in the marketing side of the business or other areas. Because I think as you build out and grow and hyperscale automation, it's only going to drive greater risks in terms of whether it be security or other risks. And we need to make sure we have the right ethics and governance built into when we're designing this and at the start, and making sure we don't lose any of our sort of professional standards that we're applying in our normal day-to-day business just because it's technology driven.
Yeah, some excellent points. Thank you very much. And this, well, matter of fact, on the supply chain, many companies, in particular travel industry, clients of ours, literally have to do a reboot once it comes up around people, process, technology. Whether it's a plane or it's a ship, they have to start those engines up again. They have to get the people back in, and they have to make sure, to all of your points, that the portfolio and process has been defined and put in place for success. So I love that comment around the bad organization. Hey, so I want to go back to Frank. Frank, are you still on?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah. So there are quite a few guests that are using either SAP, Oracle, Microsoft, and your case, Salesforce. From an innovative perspective and the portfolio that you have in front of you, and next year, the year after, 3 years out, do you have any suggestions or areas that you may be going on for campaign management or gathering more attention in your client experience?
Yeah, I mean, for us, I would say, the near-term focus is, on improving the efficiency of the marketing team. So, how do we improve the overall productivity? I think in 21, some of our attention will really be focused on leveraging automation to improve the user experience. And so in the US, many of you probably know, we have a bit of a retirement savings crisis, meaning that most Americans just haven't saved enough for their retirement, and everybody's situation is a little bit unique in terms of the reasons why they might not be saving as much as they should. And so we really want to leverage data and automation to serve up more personalized, prescriptive recommendations on what people should do. I think a lot of people have low financial literacy and are intimidated by the whole process of signing up for a retirement plan and allocating, their portfolio, et cetera. And so how do we make it, easier for them to do that, not only enroll, but then how do we give them the right information customized to their particular situation that allows them to optimize their savings strategy, during their working years. And then probably equally important is during their retirement years, how do we help them optimize their decumulation of those assets in a tax efficient way? So that's kind of the next frontier for us. I don't know that we'll get there in 21, probably not. It'll probably be a multi-year journey, but that's our vision around how we would leverage automation from a marketing perspective. I will say, I don't know if we'll get to it later. I know we're kind of running out of time here, but for all of those of you on the call that are, just beginning this automation journey, I think the one piece of advice and caution is certainly around the data, because a lot of tools exist in the marketplace to help with automation, but if you don't have good quality data, you don't get very far. And so just ensure that you're working closely with your appropriate stakeholders internally to ensure that the right data fields are accessible and available to you.
Yeah, thank you, Frank. That's a great point, right? Bad data in, bad results out.
Mhm.
But
Brian,
sometimes bad data can be good data.
Brian, if I can just jump on what was just said, I absolutely agree with that. We have had these situations where you say, like, we are sitting on so much data, so much, I mean, years of, in that particular context, years of data, but actually in the end, we had to kick most of it out because it was like a Swiss cheese. Like, it was not just a good data set to be used. While intuitively you would say, well, we are so lucky having all those data sets. So it's really important, the data.
Yeah, thank you, Danny. Does anyone else on the panel have any more comments around innovation, things of the future, something that's been more productive in your environment than others?
Probably just add, I think our success has come in some forms of failure. So I think in some early days we were running some of the tools, and what we were seeing is it was letting us mature quicker as an organization because the automation was showing us in terms of, again, bad data and potentially bad process, and recognizing, and I think that's something that, going back to, there's no real failure, there's just learnings, and how can you grow from these and build from these. So I think that, but I mean, the biggest value we've seen is through successive small quick wins, and I think a lot of people think, well, I'm just going to automate everything and flick a switch, and I haven't seen in my own experience any of that happening. And if anything, I think that would be quite dangerous. So it's finding those use cases, finding those small sample sizes to start and grow, and once you prove it in that small case, the growth can be exponential, right? It goes very quickly after you kind of get that confidence that it works, and I think that's another key learning is start small but grow quick, and I think a lot of people, I think, try to start with such a big use case and in a big sample size that I think it overwhelms the organization, and typically what happens is you don't ever get that sort of incentive to go faster or further, because I think you're dealing with too many problems and too many risks.
Thank you, Brian. And thanks, everyone. What a great discussion. We have had a few questions come in. So if we're not able to answer your question at the end of this session, because we do have to wrap it up pretty soon, we will follow up over email and get back to you. So I know one of the questions that came in, how do you manage the ethics concerns around automation? I don't know if we wanted to tackle that one, Brian.
Yeah, so actually I've talked to a few of you about this. So as automation increases, particularly today, Eric, do you have some thoughts on that?
I think it's a really interesting topic, and I think it's going to only become more relevant, and we can see it through, whether it be politics today, and I won't open that up, but that for everything, or whether it be cars or marketing campaigns. And I think what we're doing and looking at is one, how can we trace automation to understand we actually know what's happening and what, versus just treating it like a black box and kind of trusting that. So I think it's looking at that traceability and working with our partners like Microsoft or other companies out there to see, how we can use these different tools that are available and make sure we map that in. I think the other one is looking at our data sets and making sure we don't have bias built into a lot of the automation. I think that's a big risk too. And you've seen it as use cases in outside in the press of, automation used in recruitment and effectively bias being built in terms of selection of candidates and filtering that down. So it's looking at, making sure, you've got one, I think the principles, two, how can you trace and actually break the black box, and I think three, it's to make sure that you're avoiding any bias and effectively and truly sort of empowering and getting the best results, and through that it's looking at your data sets you're using and in terms of also the algorithms in terms of how you're applying those to ensure. But it's a hot topic, and I think I don't think there's any silver bullet. I think we're all learning, but I think we have to step back and go, ethics and governance in non-automation scenarios exist today. So how should it be totally different? And we shouldn't run away from it. We should just try to apply what we know, but try to demystify the technology and to make that more transparent, but also to make sure that accountability from the developers through to the owners of those processes in the organization continue to hold that accountability and maintain the standards those organizations apply.
Okay, so we're literally a few minutes from closing up the webinar. What I'd like to do is, first of all, let's thank Dan, let's thank Cynthia and Debbie, who organized the event. Thank you, panelists, and of course, thank you all the attendees that attended today. We had quite a few folks join. I thought it was a terrific conversation, but let's stay connected. As we put here, Emergent offers a 30-minute automation assessment. You can either go through the follow us, info@emergent.com, or you can email me. My email is up there as well. And one last thing is I allotted some classes out of one of our product design master classes. So if any of you that attended, or even the panelists, I've offered it out to them. If you have any individuals, you have fast track folks in that group, I've saved some space in that, but we would need to know by Saturday morning. So it'll be a first come, first serve. We have an additional 10 openings, and it's a terrific class. It's something that we've been working on for multiple years, and many people that are in the phase of product design and product build will get great benefit out of it. So other than that, thank you very much. We greatly appreciate you attending, and everyone be safe and keep well.